live. Hello, peeps. I'm so happy to see you this afternoon, American time. For me, it's evening, as you all know. And I can see there is drink with Tessa, Cat Spotter, uh, Lazariam, Lazariam, Kate, hey, Love by the Moon, Brooklyn, and Alara. Today, I have to start saying first that I need to thank Liam for his donation and also Ophelia. She donated for my GoFundMe. As you all know, I've got it pinned on the top because I do not have PayPal. Now, next week, I will have somebody that I picked from YouTube, Chris Shoop. And I really like this YouTube, so I invited him for the healing session for next week. And this week we have Nicole, and Nicole Frolick is, I admire her because she has more experience than me and she does such a great job. She is an intuitive life coach and she will tell us all about her work and the things she does, her experiences. She also has an academy where she teaches people about alchemy healing, and she's going to explain that all to us. So, hello, Nicole.
Hi, how are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm good. It's good to see you still nice and summery tanned.
I try to keep it as far round the year as I possibly
Oh,
can.
you do? But
Yeah.
it's always warm when you are, right?
Well, it isn't necessarily, but I'm up in Denver, so we're super high up to we're like a mile high right up here. So whenever it's sunny, if I sit out in my backyard, it always feels 15 to 20 degrees warmer than what it is even in the winter. So
Oh.
I can kind of get away with getting a little bit of sun even in like January and February. So
Oh,
I try to.
really?
Yeah, I
Oh,
try
well,
to.
I can forget about that because that's not going to happen here. It's already really cold, raining all week, and yeah, you can say that the fall has started here, and you can see it on my face. As a usual redhead, I'm as white as your t-shirt, but the differences have to be there. And so, tell me, how is everything going? You have your channel, and I always try to send people there because you have such awesome guests and you cover everything also regarding healing. And can you tell us a bit about what you do?
Yeah, so I do intuitive life coaching, but I kind of started everything through my YouTube channel. And I'm really into spirituality. So everything that I do comes from the tones and the messaging through spirituality. And I've used that channel to kind of put out all these different messages. And as I've grown over the years in my own, and I guess in my own journey, gone through my own healing, a lot of my intuitive gifts have opened up. So I use my channel to deliver sometimes channeled messages, just my understanding of what's happening with the energies to help people through certain times. I'll have guests on my podcast. I have a podcast that I air now from my channel, and also do tarot readings, which is so fun. I feel like I'm a kid
Yes.
in a candy store when I do those. But overall, though, it's just to kind of help people move through the ascension process, not feel alone on the journey of self-discovery, because that often happens
Yeah.
when the awakening happens.
Yes, because well, I mean, I really love what you do, and I also watch obviously your show, and I think and I did with you an interview as well, which was
Yeah.
super great, and so you the tarot you do on the side, then how do you get your, because you are intuitive, yeah, I am too, but you work with it properly for healings and stuff. And what I love about it is that we both do a bit of the same, because it's all about awakening, and it's all about getting people on track with wherever they are in their awakening. And
Hmm.
so you have a different approach, and so can you tell me how that works for you?
Well, it's kind of, I don't ever coach one person the same way. I really use my intuitive gifts to read into that person and what they're needing in that moment. I do a lot of inner child work. I think
Yes.
it's really important. And it's one of the things that is the biggest missing part to the healing journey, because so much of our programming and the roots of a lot of our pain have been put into our subconscious through the ages of basically from 0 to 7.
Yes.
And so we can try to like transform our lives from the conscious state that we're in right now. But if we're not aware of how deeply embedded these programs have been for, depending on what age you are, it's decades, many decades. If you're not going in there to heal, then you're not getting anywhere near the results that you could get, because the subconscious basically runs 95% of all of our creations. Anything that we're manifesting, usually 95% of it comes from our subconscious, and 5% is the conscious mind. So if we're not actually going in and reprogramming the subconscious, then every time we try to consciously manifest something, it's like we're going up against a giant, and that's the subconscious. So I do a lot of work with the inner child, because oftentimes on our journey, what happens is every time we experience something traumatic, and remember, when we're kids, what we see as adults could be minor to us as children. It's huge.
Yes.
And that never changes. So if we don't go back and rebuild the relationship and recollect all of the fractal parts of ourselves from all of the childhood memories, and then sometimes we have to go back to past lives, but just to keep it basic here in this lifetime, you have to rebuild that relationship with yourself. And so many of us, especially on the awakening journey, feel abandoned. We feel alone. We also don't feel like we're seen or we're heard. How many times have we tried to tell people or red pill someone, and they just don't want to have anything to do with us or hear from us, or they don't want to listen? And that usually stems from inner child not feeling heard, not feeling seen, and feeling completely abandoned. And
because
so when you
I never I had a lot of therapies, as you know, and everybody was always talking about inner child. I never understood exactly what was meant with it. I couldn't access it. Now, on hindsight, I understand why, because I can't even remember the first 7 years, right? So, but now what you just said now about how as an adult you still have the same reactions as a child, that is what it's about.
It is. It really is. Like,
Oh,
it's
I
so,
get it.
yeah. Okay, good.
Took a while, but now I've got it. You actually explained it exactly like I wanted to understand it, because I didn't understand what do they mean? Do I need to go back but what you're actually saying literally is like you still have the same habits or reactions as you would have as a child.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you heal that inner child.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So when you go back and you heal it from the root of the problem, okay, you go back in time. We can time travel like anyone's business. Okay, we're all time travelers. You go back in time and you heal that. You neutralize the emotional charge through that healing, and now you no longer carry that emotional charge into your present moment, into this current timeline.
Yes.
Which means now, if someone were to say something that you normally would be triggered by, you're no longer triggered.
Yeah.
You have a different reaction.
Yeah.
And it's so liberating, because none of us like being triggered, at the mercy of our own triggers, right? So yeah, it's really important. And it's been life-changing for me. I've been on the healing journey since I was 20, 21.
Right.
I sought out a naturopath, and I was looking into my own journey. I was doing past life regressions, and nothing has come close to the effectiveness and the quantum healing that's available to us when we do work with the inner child.
We have so much in common in that sense. Only you started way earlier than me, and I had to figure it all out. I came out of that, typical medical system and all that, and so only to then discover that side where you're talking about. And back to the inner child, I understood the concept all along. I just didn't know that was what was meant with the inner child. So I do understand that you need to heal stuff from when you're young, but and you need to adapt new habits and belief systems. And I just didn't know that was meant with inner child. And these are obviously all terms that being used. And so for me, it's always a bit difficult to understand, even in my own language, because apparently I just don't work with terms that, if I don't understand it properly, like, okay, what you mean? But I love that you started that early and you discovered that. So how did you discover that? Because were you intuitive like very early on?
Not that I remember. I think I might have been as a kid, but I don't have any memories of it. Other than I loved looking up at the stars, and I was always tuned into, I guess, I loved mythology and mythological creatures.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I totally was into that. But the reason why it started was because of a physical health issue.
Okay.
I had dated a guy, my first boyfriend. I was from 18 to 20, and it was a really toxic relationship, but it was the first person I had ever been intimate with.
Yeah.
And I'd only been intimate with him. And when I went to go for my regular like pap test as a woman, or I should say it was my first time, they called me with the test results, and the woman told me I had HPV.
What's
And
that?
human papilloma virus. I think it's very common now. I think like 75% of the population has it, and now they have a vaccine for it. Which thank God that wasn't around when I was.
Exactly.
But yes, but the way she told me, I'll never forget this. I was in my parents' house by myself, and when she told me, she made it sound like I would never heal from it, and that it could lead to cervical cancer.
Oh,
And
wow.
there were so many things that went through me that emotionally, where I had the biggest lump in my throat. I was crying while she was telling me this. And I thought, I'm tainted for life now. I have an STD. Like, what? I've never had sex. I saved myself for someone that I wanted, that I thought I was in love with. I thought I'd done everything right. And then, I find out this. Of course, now I know that it's a very normal thing. And anyway, what can happen when you have this is that you get like these abnormal pap tests, so the cells of your cervix become abnormal. Sometimes they're low grade, then they can go high grade, and if they get past high grade, now they're precancerous. And
Oh, wow.
so there were all these things that I had to be worried about. And so while I'm sitting at like my parents' kitchen table, absolutely sobbing in tears, all of a sudden this message came into my mind that I had to go back and look at this newspaper clipping that a friend gave me 6 months prior. And so I went and I looked, and it was the number to this naturopath that originally why he'd given it to me was because they were offering applied kinesiology courses, because I was really into health and wellness and kinesiology. And so I'm like, oh, this is the reason why this person gave it to me. It wasn't for the courses. This was for this. So I called and I got an appointment with the wife, and she sat me on our first session. She was amazing. She was my first major spiritual mentor. She basically opened me up to the fact that I'd had no love for myself. I didn't love myself at all. And she helped me work through a lot of my issues with my father. But she said, Nicole, it's just a virus. Your body is designed to take in virus. I mean, we're talking about it right now with everything that we're going on in 2020.
Yeah.
Our body deals with viruses all the time. We just need to find out why it's holding on to it and
Exactly.
why it's not letting it go. And so she did actually past life regression. And one of my past lives, apparently I was some really beautiful type of queen or something, where all of the men really were wanting to be with me. And I felt very uncomfortable by it. I didn't like it. I didn't like being seen for my looks only. And I think the advances of men I was very uncomfortable with. And so I had dressed up as a hag one day and left the whole kingdom and hid as a commoner in the village for the rest of my life.
What
And
time period was that? Because I'm
I'm
curious.
not I'm not sure, to be quite honest. I didn't get that detail, but she said the reason why you're holding on to this virus is because this is your way of keeping men at bay.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That
And
makes sense.
yeah, it made a lot of sense. And as soon as she said it, I burst into tears.
Oh,
So my
wow.
cells felt it. My cells knew it. And and it's interesting because this continues to play out in my life, where just last year Well, first I should say within 6 months, she had me on homeopathics. We were doing all this different healing. And within 6 months, I went back, tested, it was gone.
Wow.
So yeah, so that was great. And that kind of reestablished my faith in the fact that there are more answers out there than what Western medicine is giving us. And not that Western medicine doesn't have its place, because it absolutely does, but it's just more for emergency purposes. It's not for, day-to-day
Because
living. And
I did have also the regression, and I lived apparently in these very specific times, every time that was like crucial in history, humankind, and indeed, I also found a lot of synchronicities with the things that I went through in this life, and hence why I did the regression in the first place, and also the QHHC. And that was mind blowing. QHHC is like a step up. It's, have you done it?
yeah, I have. Once I believe I did it, and it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
So, and you talk about alchemy healing. So, can you explain to us what alchemy is exactly?
When we think about alchemy, have you ever read the book The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho?
I've never done that. I'm ashamed, but I
I
know.
know. Okay, it's a great book.
I
It's
know.
it's it's a classic, and
Yes.
basically talks about like the journey of the self and the alchemy that we kind of go through. But when you talk about alchemy, it also talks about turning lead into gold, taking base metals and turning them into something like gold. Well, our base metals in our journey is kind of like the ego and a lot of our pains and our traumas. And how do we use our higher self, our higher awareness, our connection to God, source, whatever it is that you call or resonate with? How do you use that connection to transform and heal yourself into gold, so to speak?
Yeah.
What does gold represent? It represents Christ consciousness. It represents the unity consciousness. And
Yes.
so this whole transformation, we're literally all alchemists. And the healing journey is part of the alchemizing of our existence here, our journey
So
here.
alchemy would be then transformation.
Hmm.
Okay. That's
Yes.
because I never really, well, again, same thing. So I wanted to understand that properly. Now, well, we did the same thing in that case, because you grow, and then at a certain point you just understand that you have to change things, no matter how rough that is, but that's the only way to go. And so at a certain point you start, I don't know if you experienced that, but that you start to actually, I wouldn't say looking forward, but being see it as a challenge when something like that happens that you bump into in your life, and then make it a challenge to turn it around, to
Hmm.
transform it. For me, that is how I really I kind of like it now, because it's a puzzle, it's a challenge, but at the same time, it's about trusting that it is what it is, but that you can do something about it. And so you do this proactively as well, with the people that you have your academy with. And so, how is that going so far? What do you see in there with people transforming?
Oh my gosh, it's so much fun. Like it's probably one of my favorite creations, this monthly program. It's a monthly subscription program. I made it super affordable. So basically, anyone who
Yes.
really can't afford one-on-one coaching can be part of it. And
Oh, I put
it's,
it. I put all her website, her channel, and her Twitter in the link below, in the description, so if you wanna, if you're interested, you can find it there.
yeah. And on my website, there's a tab there that says Academy. And if you click on it, you can go there. And in my alchemy program, the alchemy program is what I have about 50 people in the program right now. And we have our own Discord. I have a private Discord chat for them, which I just created actually a month or two ago.
Oh,
And that is what's changing the ball game for everyone, because not only are they getting, I'm helping them through the journey of understanding, one, how the astrological alignments and the energies are influencing us in our own shadow work.
yes.
So each month I take them through certain things, transits that are happening, and what we can expect in our own personal journey, and then how to move through that. But
Yeah.
then I also will bring up certain lessons or things that I've understood along the way to help them get through it, or give them exercises or homework to do. I also put in guided meditations. I create guided meditations each month. So there's a new one in there each month. And what it is, it's a place for people who don't feel like they know where they belong, or they feel a lack of sense of community because they're feeling so alone on this awakening journey,
Yes.
that they're now being able to build friendships with people online through the Discord chat, through showing up on my
Yes.
live calls every month. And it's so beautiful to see. There's one girl in our Discord chat, she just spontaneously started speaking light language. So we'll go into the
Oh,
voice channel and she'll start speaking light language for all of us. And it just helps activate. And it's other people. One woman, she's helping. I'm so proud of her. She's starting her own business because she can tune into, she knows how to clear homes that are kind of like haunted or have a lot of dark energy in them. And she specializes in homes where people have committed suicide. And she's helping them to also go on, like to not be stuck in this plane, like in between the two planes of existence, and helping them heal so that they can move on to their next phase of their journey.
yeah.
So it's kind of like cool, like everyone's kind of coming up and starting to activate some of their own intuitive gifts while going through their own healing work, inner child work, all of that kind of stuff.
But that's how it's done, right? Because everybody that even does a training, you want to be, I don't know, a therapist, whatever, you first have to go through it yourself. And obviously I've done that on my own, because, and I didn't even see it as a training or whatever. It was just necessary, not knowing that now I'm so knowledgeable about whatever because I had to figure out step by step, hence why it took so long. But now I'm able to actually see it with others. I can see at what level they are, and immediately, give them whatever suits for them. And it's great. And like you said, on Discord, you have this video chat, you have, so people can talk to each other. So that's a brilliant idea. And you bring people together because it also accelerates their healing, right? And it gets the best out of themselves, so they start
Yeah.
implementing their own strength and their own powers.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I'm really proud of it because I love seeing people grow and grow from not just feeling welcomed finally for who they are truly, like unauthentically, but also growing to the point where they have enough courage to start using their gifts
Yes.
in ways that a lot of us are scared to, because the world right now currently isn't as accepting of those kind of
Yeah.
things. So
The
and
judgment.
most people are, I have a political section of the group, and so everyone for the most part is pretty much like a Q follower or a Trump fan. So
Oh, they
it
are.
yeah, most of them are. What's been really cool is it's, I've been watching the chat, and not everyone's always on the same page, but everyone's been communicating really respectfully, which really makes me
Exactly.
happy. They're honoring everyone for where they stand, which is their own sovereignty, their own right to believe what they want and speak their truth, which I
That's
love.
that is exactly what I stimulate as well. But that is also part of healing, because that's where we are growing, right? No judgmentals anymore, and all these things. So you want to, this is part of where we start to ascend, because we do not get stuck anymore in different
Mm-hmm.
opinions. So I also saw that you have equally men and women, because usually attracts a lot of women. But I found that awesome to see, and I see it myself as well. That the men also start to do the works and wanting, because you know how that is. That
Mm-hmm.
that there was this, I don't know, taboo, like, okay, I'm not into that fluffy stuff, but it's not about fluffy.
Mm-mm.
And I love that I saw many men as well, equally as women in your.
Yeah, and my live chats and stuff. Yeah, the men are great. I have like a really good audience. They're super supportive, and everyone is like, they're intelligent. They ask really great questions, and I'm like, in the spiritual community, I've always found there's been it's been heavily weighted towards the divine feminine energies and focusing more on the women. And I feel like the men have been left out. And
Yeah.
I think they bring just as much stuff to the table that we all need to learn from. And so I've been a little bit more of a voice for the masculine. And like I just did a video on how feminism has ruined dating
Oh,
for
yes, I
both.
saw that.
Yeah.
Brilliant, because seriously, I think exactly the same. I mean, uh, it makes men also insecure in a sense because, well, it's just a form of racism as well, right?
It's an ism. It's an ism, and we have too many of them. And it's
Yeah.
basically just shutting down men in, just who their own identity, how they're able to communicate, what their own self-worth is, their value, their place in society. It's just shutting all of that down. And I'm just, I'm definitely for the fact that we as women definitely needed to have our equality put in place, and it has been for a while. There are no laws in place now that prevent us from anything opportunity that a man has. So I feel now that it's all toxic.
Yes.
Like feminism has become toxic for the female and the male. So I've been a voice about that on my channel. Anyone who follows me for a while knows that.
Yes, yes, I
But
do the same because I feel that they are otherwise left behind. Somebody in the chat, they are asking, what is light language? Can you define that?
light language is, basically, it sounds like someone speaking in tongue. It's very similar to that, but it is of the sound and frequency of the heart field, and it's basically the language of light, which exists throughout the entire universe and universes beyond. And so it speaks not to your mind, the logical mind, but more through the heart. And you understand it more through connecting in that sense. Now, a lot of the light language, when you listen to it, it can activate other people to start speaking their own light language. I know that's happened for quite a few people, but it's almost like you become a transmitter for these codes and frequencies to come through, and you're the grounding unit and putting it out into the field for whoever might be around that needs it. Maybe it's just the general area that needs those codes or frequency boost. So it
Yes, because
sounds kind of like
it is.
gibberish.
Yes, it sounds like, but it is what it is about. It's not about the ear. It's about the
Mm-mm.
frequency. It's the
Mm-hmm.
sound. It's the words have a certain sound, and so they heal. And that is what you can say also about light language, right?
Yeah, and what's so interesting is lately I've been having dreams of myself speaking light language, and
Well,
it's so
since I
funny.
learned about it, which is a while ago, and then I realized as a child, I did it all the time before sleeping, and I was doing that, and it felt so good. That's why I did it. I remember this so vividly. I just didn't know why I felt the urge to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and so and it's gibberish, but it just I just had to do it, and so obviously many many years later, which is now what, probably 2 or 3 years ago that I learned about it, I was like, oh, so that is what I was doing when I was a child and in
Mm-hmm.
bed, and
Mm-hmm.
and and
Yeah.
and my brothers would say, can you shut up? And I'm like, but I just couldn't stop, and I didn't even know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was saying, but now I do, and now it starts to come back.
Oh, there you go. Because the more you become aligned with that part of you who was a child, we have to remember that this whole matrix, this whole planet that we've
Yeah,
incarnated in that is under dark control is designed to shut down all of the parts of us that came in as a child.
yeah,
That's why going back to the inner child is so important, because you start to tune in to that direct connection to source, God, and all of the gifts that you brought in with it. So because you're becoming more aligned with that connection and you're feeding that connection, it's reactivating and remembering everything that you came in with.
yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
you also get messages through, like, well, is it channeling, or is it just like you said, the voice that came in your head at the time? Did that stay with you? Did you keep developing that, or
It's developed over time, more so in the last, I want to say, 4 to 5 years,
okay?
which 2016 was the initiation of my the awakening that has not been nonstop since.
Yeah.
I mean, I started awakening around 17 and it's been in phases, but this one has been like a really strong one.
Yeah.
And the more I trust what I'm getting, at first it's kind of like, it feels, for me, I don't get an actual voice. I get more like telepathy. It's like, it's a download. It's in my head all of a sudden. I didn't think it. It's just there. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like, for instance,
Yeah.
I had contact one night. I was in meditation, communicating with the Pleiadians because I'm Pleiadian.
Yeah.
And I was feeling really alone. I was going through a very dark night of the soul of my awakening. And I just felt really alone. And after 2 hours of being in meditation, I basically said, can you just please let me know I'm not alone? Please let me know you're here. I feel very alone right now. And when I went down to I was at my parents that summer visiting, and I went down to the kitchen, to the water cooler, all the house lights were off. And as I was getting water, I heard in my mind telepathically, look out the window. And I thought, did that just come into my head? And so I'm like, okay, so I look out the window and it's looking into my parents' backyard, and there's a really big maple tree right in the center of the yard. And I'm looking at the maple tree, and then I'm kind of looking around, and I'm just like, okay, I'm just kind of looking. And all of a sudden, this white orb, shows up in the maple tree. Must have been about the size between a baseball and a soccer ball. And it just starts darting in and out of the tree, up and down through the tree, like
Oh my
for a
God.
solid minute. And I standing there going, you are seeing this, Nicole. Do not doubt yourself later. This is 100% real. And I realized that this is the Pleiadians coming in what we call non-corporeal, and a non-corporeal entity,
Yeah.
right?
So light beings.
Yeah. And they just were letting me know that they were there, and that they heard my call or cry, I guess, for help or to be heard.
Wow.
So I have a strong connection to the Pleiades.
How do
I
you
get
know that?
messages.
How do you know it's the Pleiadians? Because I obviously there's not many people, or there are people that don't are not familiar with these things at all. So,
Mm-hmm.
what does that entail for you?
Well,
How?
most of us have a connection to the Pleiades because it's the closest star system. So all of us have to come through the Pleiades star system to get to Earth. So a lot of us have that connection. For me, I just, it's interesting. Like I talked about the naturopath I had when I was 21. One of the first books she gave me was about the Pleiadians. She goes, you
Oh,
need to read this. And I'm like, oh, what are they?
yeah.
And so she was working with, what is his name that channeled the Carol? Was it something Carol who
Oh,
channeled the Pleiadians? She actually had him over at his house, and they were having like, meetings and stuff. And so she had actually asked me if I wanted to come to one, but I don't know. It's just a frequency. I understand. Also, there's a certain color I get in my mind that I see. The blue frequency I know that's them. And I kind of just know. I just tune in. And it's something that I've had to strengthen. It's not something that I knew instantly.
yeah.
I've had to build the trust over time.
Right. And so you use that as well. I mean, you get then, because I know what you mean when you say all of a sudden there's this thought placed in your head, and but that can also be dark things, right? Because I've been there, where you get the constant negative bombarding in your mind. But
Mm-hmm.
now, obviously, since I'm all over that and I did all my healing, and now I get these all of a sudden, boom, like a thought pops in your mind, and it was not my thought. It just
Mm-hmm.
came from somewhere, and it helps you. And so that is similar to what you're explaining here, right?
Yes, it's exactly what I get. Sometimes I channel. Um,
What does
what
that
I
mean?
channel.
What?
So I just start talking, and I'm not thinking about it. It's just words are coming out of my mouth. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go with this and not try to stop it. And so sometimes I'll channel messages either from my higher self or the Pleiadians. But now what I work with clients is, because I've done so much work with my inner child, she helps me tune into other people's inner child, and I can actually get channeled messages from their inner child that
Wow.
their inner child wants them to know and pay attention to for healing. So
Right.
that's been something that's been really cool that I only started doing at the beginning of this year, only
Yeah.
because I received the message, you're going to start channeling people's inner child. And I started with someone who I had a very strong connection with. So it was really easy for me. And then
Yeah.
I've just kind of built upon it.
So, because you mentioned also that you had to do with sexual abuse, and you obviously many have experience with that. Can you talk about your healing regarding that and how you went about it?
Yeah. So it's interesting because um, I only discovered a year ago or started to remember that I had been sexually abused as a kid. And, how it all happened was so interesting because I had again been at a gynecologist. I'd gone for a pap test, and I was there because I should say a year or two prior on a pap test, they had found two black spots on my cervix. And that kind of, or some, yeah, I would think of my cervix, and that started to worry me. That freaked me out. And so I started like, what do I do? What do I do? I don't want to like go in and kind of burn things off or anything like that. I want to know why this is manifesting in my body. And I worked with my Akashic reader and healer who I work with to help me. And we worked in conjunction with the Pleiadians and my higher self and my inner child to work with the energies of healing the divine feminine. Apparently, I had come in to help heal some of the ancestral karma of the female lineage, and also for collectively, which many of us are doing. And so it had been a year since I started that healing, and I go in, but I'm going in for another reason. There was something else that was happening that felt off down there.
Yeah.
And sorry for all the men, but you know what? Your women are going to go through this too. So it's actually good for everyone to know. So
Yes.
I go in there and I'm waiting for the doctor to come in. And of course, your feet are in the stirrups, you're half
Yeah.
naked from the waist down.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I started to get really scared.
Oh. Oh,
And
I know that feeling. Yeah.
I started crying,
Mm.
and I started to feel like, I don't want to be here alone. I don't want to be here alone. Why am I alone? I don't want to be alone. And I kept saying that over and over again. And then I had a very distinct feeling of feeling 6 years old ish. I'm like, why do I feel like I'm six? Why do
Yeah.
I feel like I'm six right now? And I'm like, why do I not want? And I'm like, oh my God, Nicole, what's going on? It's like I had this awareness outside of me of realizing this is not normal. Like, get it together. The doctor's going to be in the room in any minute. And at the same time, I'm like, I just want my mom and dad. I don't want to be alone anymore. And so she finally comes in. I get it together. She does the testing, and she's like, oh, I said, asked her, can you tell me about the black spots? And she goes, well, what black spots? And I said, well, I had two black spots the last time I came in. And she said, oh, well, the good news is those are gone. And I'm like, oh, okay. Thank God there's some good news there. So I'm like, okay, that's great. So I knew that I had healed. And what was interesting was when I asked how long it would take for me to heal the black spots, the Pleiadians told me 10 months in October of 2019. It was October of 2019 when I was in there for the session. So I was like, oh, wow, this is so cool. But obviously now something new is coming to the surface. So I come out of that session, I call my best friend, and I'm like, something's happening. I got to find out what's going on. So I book another session with my Akashic reader, and she's like, okay, your inner child really wants to connect with you. She
Yeah.
really needs you to tune in, and she has information she wants to give you. And she's like, I don't want to plant any seeds. She goes, I kind of see stuff, but I don't want to plant them for you, which I appreciated. So I go into meditation, and I'm realizing I think I was sexually abused when I was like 5, 6 years old. And I'm like, but by who? And so I was, of course, terrified, terrified. Was it my dad? No, it couldn't be. I love my dad. There's no way. Like you start to think like, who is it? Because I don't remember. All I have are these emotions coming up. So in meditation, I would sit in meditation, call in my inner child, and I would just allow her to let these feelings come to the surface within me. And I just would bawl. I'm like, why, what? Like, feel so violated. I feel, all these things. And then one time she took me into my Akashic records. So I started going into my own Akashic records, and she would go with me. And we brought out this book, and we're kind of looking through it, and she's trying to send me messages telepathically. That's how she was communicating with me in the Akashic. And all of a
How
sudden,
does that work? What are you going
for
in
for
hypnosis?
me, it was like everyone sees the Akash differently. For me, I always go into this, I go through a portal in a tree in the forest. And like, it's kind of like, because again, this is me. I love the mythology. I love like Lord of the
So in your
Rings and all that
mind,
kind of.
you're going in like a sort of a hypnotic
I
state.
saw us going through a portal through a tree where we literally could move through the bark. It was almost like plasma. And then we're in this spiral staircase, which the spiral symbology of, going down, down, down. And then we enter into a room, which for me was the Akashic records.
Right.
And there were all these books, but the books were on shelves, but the shelves were, it was on dimensions and dimensions and dimensions. So if you ever saw that movie Interstellar, where it was
Yes,
just
yes,
like, yeah, it's exactly how it looked. So I could see something way back in a further dimension, and I'd pull it like with my mind, it would pull it to the front, and then I'd grab it and take it to this table.
right.
So her and I would be there, and I remember I started getting these messages from her. I'm like, that there was a man that did some stuff to me, and I'm like, okay, it was a man. She then gives me the name Michael. And I'm like, Michael. And I'm like, I have a cousin, Michael, but I'm like, no, it couldn't have been him. And I'm like, well, maybe I'm just making this up in my head because,
That's what you
like,
do. Yeah.
yeah, what's what you do.
Yeah.
And as soon as I said in my mind, as soon as I had that thought, I'm making it up in my mind, she went, no, you're not. I'm trying to give you the information you need to listen to me. And I'm like, whoa, okay, you're boss in here. I'll listen. So she gives me this information. And so I take that information to my next Akashic session. And
Wow, that's cool.
yeah, so my Akashic reader, she's like, yeah, she goes, he was very like much older. I see like an older man ancestrally, someone very far away, not very close to you. And she goes, I'm getting the name like Mikey Mickle. And I hadn't told her the name. I never told her the name. So I was like, oh my gosh. And she goes, Mickle, Mikey. And I was like, it's my mom's uncle, Mickey.
Oh my.
And he lived in England. So I was in Canada. And so I never saw him. And all of a sudden I started getting these understandings of when it happened. And it was at my grandparents' house because it was one of my grandparents' brother. And I remember it was like a pool party, I shouldn't say a pool party. It was like a pool family event, but it was a summer day. And he took me up into one of the bedrooms and touched me and did things that no man should ever do to any child.
Yeah.
And so I started remembering all of this stuff, and it was I went through so many different stages of like anger and, like hatred, and like, how did you steal my innocence away from me? Because as soon as I remembered and realized that this had happened to me, everything clicked into place for my entire life of understanding why I was so destructive in my relationships, why I chose to be so, I guess, there was a phase in my life, between my late 20s and early 30s, where I was very sexually promiscuous and didn't care
Yes.
who I slept with, and wasn't like that at all until someone really hurt me and shut me down in my heart. And I thought, oh, I'm going to get this person back and I'm just going to sleep with whoever I want. And really, I was just hurting myself.
Yes.
But I made these, and then of course there were decisions within those little relationships that I made that were so all were rooted in this one moment.
Destructive. Yeah.
And
Destructive.
so I had to do all this healing. So then right around the time where I realized who it was the end of December of last year. And I started to gain weight really fast. Like when I say gain weight, I'm usually at the same weight all the time, but I gained about 6 pounds in a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
and nothing I was
Stress.
doing was taking it off. And I'm like, what is happening here right now? And I kept getting this message to open my old computer, which had a document on it that my grandfather had written for all of us back in 2006, had basically the life story of my grandparents and their brothers and sisters, which I knew
wow.
he was in there. And I kept getting this message every time I passed by the closet where my old computer was. They're like, go in there and read it. Go in there and read it. And I kept avoiding it. I kept avoiding it. Finally, I'm like, why? I can't get rid of this. Wait, I think I have to go and read this document. There's something in there that's part of my healing. And I had gained 6 pounds. So I go and I read this document, and it basically, my Nana grew up in Myanmar, which is Burma, the old
Yeah,
Burma
yeah.
near Thailand.
Myanmar.
And
Yeah,
yeah, and when the Japanese were invading, they had to escape,
yeah,
and they bombed all of the airports before they could escape through flight. So they had to take the trek through the jungles and the mountains and to get to India. And so she was a family of 4 kids and her 2 parents. And what should have only been a 2-week journey turned into 7 months
yeah,
because it was monsoon season. And so, like, the rivers got really high and impassable. There was a lot of made it very difficult. And they had, there were men who were coming in and trying to rape the women and the children. And there was just all these things that happened along the way. They had no food. I think the British were trying to airdrop food to them, but it was very minimal rations. And
yeah,
along the way, both their parents suffered from dysentery and ended up dying. And they had to bury their parents on in the jungle there and leave them behind and continue on parentless. And the man who did this to me was 12 at the time. When they finally made it, and when I read through this document, what they had to go through just breaks my heart. Like, it's horrific. It's horrific that any child, any human has to go through that.
yeah,
But they finally make it after a 7-month journey to India, and him and his younger brother, who was 3, had to be put into boarding school because my Nana and her older brother were 16 and 18. They had to work and had to take care of themselves. And so they were able to put them into boarding school, which the government apparently was paying for, and all of that. And instantly I knew he was sexually abused there. Instantly I knew.
yeah,
And instantly I realized he would have never done to me what he did if it didn't happen to him.
yeah.
And so I put the document, I closed my computer down, I went into meditation, and I just sat there and I felt all of his pain. And I just said, as I'm sitting there, I felt so sorry for him. I'm like, I'm so sorry this happened to you. I'm so sorry that you had to go through this. Like, no child should ever have to have that kind of a journey. And I just started bawling, and I kept saying, I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. And I had a blanket with me because I was crying so much. It was soaking through the entire blanket. And then I literally heard chains break. I'll never forget it. I literally heard chain. I felt like I released him from some sort of bondage that he was attached to, the guilt that he felt as a soul for doing what he did to me. And I don't know if he did it to anyone else, but I'm like, I release you. I forgive you. Like, you can go on. Like, there is no more, pain here. The interesting thing is that when I finally came out of there, I weighed myself and I lost 3 pounds in 2 hours
Oh my
of,
gosh.
yeah.
Yeah, that's how it works. It's
And
amazing how the body reacts to
it's
whatever you gave.
crazy.
Yeah,
And then I wake up the next morning, all 6 pounds are gone. And I'm like, what?
yeah,
So, yeah, it was, and this is where I really understand. I'm so glad I spent a lot of time through school understanding the body. I started off as a massage therapist. I did 2 years in university studying kinesiology. So I really understand human anatomy, the cells. I've worked with blood under a dark field microscope to understand the cellular interaction, things, how our body works on a cellular level, and how that is all integrated through our emotional field and our mental field, and then
yeah.
our energy fields. And so I just take all of that knowledge and information that I garner through my own journey and apply it to understanding how to help others heal while I'm still healing through my own journey. I don't think we ever stop. But
It's
yeah,
amazing because I have a similar story actually. It's funny how every time I talk to somebody and I'm like, oh my gosh, I recognize, because also the Japanese, that stuff. My family obviously part is Indonesian, and so they went through, many people went through that, those stories, rape, as children, things like that, even babies. Um, Horrible. It was a horrible, horrible war, and so yeah, I'm familiar with that through the stories from my family, because they lived in Indonesia and Myanmar, Indonesia. They all went through that same
Mm-hmm.
war on that side of the world, right? And the violence, the rapes, and all these things, especially with children. Now, in my experience, it was actually that at a certain point, I just had my underwear on. I was in bed, it was warm, and I was sitting in a position that all of a sudden threw me back into a flashback, like same as you. I must have been, I don't know, even younger, 4 or so. And but I was so shocked. I went in a panic because immediately I knew what was happening. And this is actually a year ago. This happened, and so I know exactly, like, the situation you find yourself in and the position, and all of a sudden you're thrown back in that body as a child where something like that happened. And I had the same. I all of a sudden saw myself in that environment. It was a room, and it was, I don't want to go into detail because, you know. And so I asked my mom about it. Was there any room that as a child where we lived that looked like this and that? And certain things she confirmed, and other things she didn't know exactly. I know it's I don't know if it was family. I didn't want to go into it too deep because I already had other stuff previously discovered that I dealt with. And so I dealt with it in a different way than you did. Um, However, I mean, now that you tell your story, I'm thinking, maybe I need to go deeper in that as well. However, because it still can hold you back, even if you don't know it. And but anyway, yeah, I recognize so much in what you're telling here, and how that works. And I'm sure we're not the only ones that, you're not aware of it
Mm-hmm.
until that one day you find yourself in a moment where uh, you go in a sort of a panic and you don't know why, and then you get thrown back as a child. And so, yeah, I
Yeah. And, I've been very open about this, like on my Raw and Real series that I do on my channel. And I've told this story from the point where I was actually going through it. I was told that my audience was going through it as I was going through it. And so many people have reached out to me since bringing this to my channel, telling me I was the same way. 30 years I've lived my life, for 40 years, and then all of a sudden I started remembering that I was sexually abused. I had no idea until like it started to come to the surface. And this is very common for people to not
yes,
even know that they were sexually abused until all of a sudden something starts coming to the surface because it's time to do that healing.
yeah.
And many times I think we have to get to a place within our own healing journey where we're ready to go into some of those deeper traumatic wounds, because if we're not, it could traumatize us all over again.
Well, that's interesting because now that great awakening, etc., people start to, wake up to these things. And I also know from child on that happened to me as well, where I constantly thought, I said to myself, no, it was a dream. It was a dream, but it was so, I mean, it was so detailed and I knew everything. Plus, I verified everything, the house, what it looked like. And I thought, as a 3-year old, you would never remember that.
Mm-mm.
And so I had to ask because I wanted to verify it. So I did ask my mom, did it look like that? Was my room there? Was my bed there? And she confirmed everything. And that's when I knew it really happened. I knew this all my life, but I dealt with that. But then came indeed a story like this, something that I never remembered. And so there were multiple things that happened. And so I think that in this moment in time, people start to remember things, memories coming back about trauma, because you know what? They need to be released right now in this moment in time, right?
Yeah. And I mean, because, I know that luckily for me, I consider myself one of the lucky ones because it only happened once. And
Yeah.
I know that this is an ongoing trauma that happens for many people as a
Yeah.
child. So in that regard, I
Men and
do,
women.
yeah, men
Men.
and women, there
Yeah.
is no distinction between the two. And I feel that I chose this as part of my soul's journey so that I could help heal others, that I could
Yes.
understand that many times we have to go through an experience in order to understand it, which is the whole reason why we're all here on earth. It's to,
Yes.
yeah.
We need to go, and this is also what the whole Great Awakening, because in this case it's about sexual abuse, but there's so many other ways of traumas that, maybe how you've been put down constantly, or how you lost a parent, and you didn't have that role model, and so many people have these traumas that they need to go through now in this period in time, and yeah, it's very important, and it's great the job, the work that you do, and how heal people, the same. I come from a different perspective in that sense, and the things that I do, because I only learned what I learned. I didn't go to school to learn what I learned. I went through it myself, step by step, and
Hmm.
but it doesn't matter, because for everybody there is a way and a modality for healing. This is why actually I invited you, because you have a different approach, and for many people that works, and so I want them to know and to be familiar with the things that you do. And so what are your approaches to people that come with other traumas, or do you only work in group form or also individual?
No, yeah, I predominantly work in like one-on-one. I do all my sessions through Zoom, and yeah, I've worked with all different kinds of people,
Yeah.
different traumas. There isn't anything that I've come across that I feel uncomfortable or feel like I can't help someone. If I were to come across that, I would let them know. Like, I don't think I'm able to help you here, but I haven't come across anything there, because at the end of the day, the patterns all come down to the same place, and the roots are all the same way. I know how to get to the roots. So, um, it's, like, I've worked with all people from all different walks of life. I've worked
Yeah.
with people who are not really awakened to all of this stuff, so I don't bring in all of this other stuff. I keep it within the framework of what the client is going to best receive the information or be helped.
Yeah.
So I kind of use my own guidance system to navigate that. But anything from like high executives to like stay-at-home moms or dads to
And they're
like,
all open to the modalities that you use, because
mhm.
it's interesting, because actually my ex, who is also my best friend, just popped in the chat and he's been listening. He just started his quantum healing study, and so he has to go through everything himself as well. He's very intuitive as well, and and so very interesting material for him. And so are people open to, I mean, do they find you, and then when you start explaining the ways that you use in order to heal, and how do you know what you're going to how you're going to approach it, because obviously you have different ways of using your way of healings, so how does that work for you?
It's just, I know it. It's just, it's there. I know it. I kind of read the situation. I can read situations and people really quickly. And I kind of get where I can and can't go. And I know what they're ready for and what they're not ready for. And I let the client kind of guide me first, because
Yes.
I want them to open the door. And then we just go as far as they're willing to go.
Yeah.
And I point out a few things and open like the mind, and we'll see where that takes us. But a lot of people are really open to the inner child stuff. It
Yeah.
scares people a little bit because, for very good reason, that's where most of our traumas are deeply embedded.
Yeah.
But it's, when we think about the Great Awakening and where we're at, the one thing that's, Q's always said, like, the one thing that's going to bring us all together is the children.
Yeah.
It's the one thing that's going to unite us, save for the few percent of people that just can't help them. But for the majority of the world, the children are going to be the unifier. And if the
Yes.
children are the unifier on our outside world, the child is the unifier on our inside world. So going within and healing the child within you is setting the world stage up for more healing for the children who are in abusive situations. So everything's connected. I see it as extremely important in our journeys, and it's just one of the reasons why I drive it home all the time with everyone. And I only drive it home because I've had so much success with it. I know how
Yes.
powerful it is. I'm not someone who promotes anything just to promote it. I only promote stuff that I know works and I
Yes.
know is effective. So I just kind of keep that in mind, that if you want to change the world, you have to start with yourself, right? That old saying that we all know. And it starts with the change within, because we're literally all creating our reality. So if you
Yeah.
can go in and heal that reality of that wounded child within who so desperately wants to be seen and heard and remembered and brought back into the fold and not be abandoned any longer,
Yeah.
then when we do that, we're helping to bring all those children who are abandoned, lost, and not being seen and not being heard to
Yeah.
finally have that voice.
Yeah, indeed. So do you also use energy healing for your like, are you?
I can. I haven't used it too much. Depends who's open to it or not, but I can kind of tune in. My body will let me know what's kind of going on in their body,
Yeah.
and we can do that. But I like to teach people how to do their own healing so they're
Yes.
not dependent on me.
Yeah.
Um, because I think it's important. I'm really not a proponent of codependency, and having proper boundaries and knowing, and I want people to feel empowered when they leave a
Yeah.
session and know that they're capable of
Well,
handling whatever they need to.
well, that's it. This is exactly the reason why I started the awakening to healing and the website's coming up, because this is what it's about. If you look at the traditional medicine, all that, they want you to be dependent on them. You always have to go back to them, and what I like is that you can teach people how to help themselves, and not only will that also it will also boost their confidence and the trust in the fact that they can heal themselves. So if you teach them that, then you're done. Your work is done. And because it's not about keeping somebody constantly there, coming back and coming back. No, at a certain point, they are able to stand on their own feet and to actually apply whatever you teach them
Mm-hmm.
to themselves. And this is what it's about. And not only that, they can start teaching others, because we're all teachers and students, right?
Yeah.
I
And
love that we have that same approach.
yeah, because codependent systems are the very systems we're trying to destroy right now.
Exactly.
The system that wants us dependent on the government or dependent on big corporations or like whatever it is, big
Or
pharma. Like,
medicine. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's just we need to break down the whole codependency structure, and the only way to start doing that is to not create codependent relationships, whether it's with our clients or with our friends or our family or our partner. And we have to break that down. And that's actually been because, and I know that this will be something that a lot of people who go through sexual abuse and other kinds of abuse will go through, is that once you start to go through your healing, you start to realize how little boundaries you actually have, and
Yes.
reestablishing those boundaries is so important. And this whole year, once
Yeah.
I figured out in January, February, and had that big, huge healing response, the rest of this year has been about reestablishing boundaries, standing up for myself when I didn't have that voice when I was 5, because my parents don't even know yet, because I haven't had a chance to sit with them and talk with them because we're not in the same country yet. But I never told anyone when I was 5 because I was scared that it would hurt the family.
Yeah.
And also I just like, would anyone believe me? Like, am I safe to tell people this? And so standing up for myself, having a voice, saying when something doesn't feel good to me or I don't feel safe, have been the themes of 2020 going forward. And so
Yes.
that's something we all have to really be aware
That's
of.
amazing, because for me the same. And I start to learn now that, well, the standing in your power, but the boundary thing. I'm so all the 2020, because obviously I told you I started this channel for personal challenge, and from there on it only went up and up, and the challenge became, well, it didn't become heavier. It just actually it became easier, but it had a flow in itself that I instantly, found all these moments where I didn't have boundaries either. And it's amazing how this year, because we know that this year we had a huge DNA change, right? And so I start feeling that like big time, and I know you do too. And
Mm-hmm.
so now it's important to actually teach this to other people as well, and to be in their power. And yeah, I'm so in awe of how you went through that journey, and for so long already. So is there so you have people coming to you because they watch your YouTube channel, right? And that's how.
Yeah, my YouTube channel has been the predominant, I guess, gateway for people in finding me and discovering me, because I've been so open about my whole journey over the last, I guess, the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
And I think people build a certain level of trust, like they do with you when they watch your channels and anyone else. Like they start to resonate with you. They start to trust the information, or they may get their own messages like, I think I need to work with this person. So that's kind of how it works. Or I'm starting to get referrals as well from people who have worked with me, and that kind of stuff starting to happen as well. So it's been like something that's beautifully grown
yeah,
in stages. And I love my work. I feel blessed to be doing the work I love. That
yes,
also feels it's it's such a what's the word I'm looking for? It's such a sacred place to be in, to bear
yes,
witness to the healing of someone else. And I take that with a deep responsibility and honor, that
yes,
someone allow me into, they feel safe enough to allow me in to be part of that journey with them. So I
yeah,
think being honest and authentic, that's been one of the other things too. Having
yeah,
my Raw and Real series, people know who they're getting. I don't try to be someone I'm not. I totally bring up when I screw up, and I'll own
yeah.
it, or I'm not perfect. I'm just
But that's the
honest.
beauty of today's way of healing, because you are equals, and you even learn, and you even learn from the people that you teach. And
Mm-hmm.
there's one of them in here in the chat. I see, I'm here from her alchemy program. And so yeah, that's
Oh, Kat.
yeah.
Yeah.
And because that's awesome. It's how in the traditional therapy, oh, the therapeutic doesn't say anything about themselves, and you sit there and talking, and you're like, I just don't feel it, and that's because there is no personal relationship, because that's what they are taught. And I don't believe in that at all. I think you should
Mm-mm.
be equals. You should be able to actually show your weak spots as well, because the whole reason that you learned what you learned is because you went all these through this yourself, and you always keep learning as well. So there's nothing wrong with showing that you bump into mistakes as well,
Mm-hmm.
and this is this misconception that many have, because when you get this distance between people that you are helping, and that you show that you're above them, it's not, because we're not, we're all on that same journey. And so oh, there's another one, Cassie. And so yeah, it's so awesome. I'm so amazed by yeah, how funny all these things come together. um and so yeah, I'm really happy to have you here about these things, and to talk about that. Now, are there any other future plans that you have, where you're going with whatever you're doing? Is there because I noticed there is a natural flow in how all of a sudden, you go in another direction, which is an extension of what you're already doing. So
Yeah, so I was actually pre-coronavirus planning a retreat in Colorado. I had the home already chosen. It was this massive home in the mountains in Breckenridge, and I was going to host an event for about 12 to 14 people to come and do a whole weekend transformational thing with me where your food was included, all your drinks, activities, everything. We were going to do a whole bunch of stuff and break through a lot of the programming. So, of course, when everything came down, I had to cancel that. So that is something that I'm going to host in the future.
Yeah.
And then I am also working on, currently working on an 8-week online course for how to access your inner child and how to work with your inner child, because
Wow.
it seems to be the big problem. And when I bring people into coaching is that I help them through certain things, but they're like, oh, do you have a course on this? Cause that would be like, wow, okay. A lot of people are asking for this. I've got to make it. So that way they can go at their own pace and have that available to someone to just take at their own way. So I'm working on that. And then I'm trying to get my second book done, but
Yeah,
I
because
get
you
all,
wrote a book. What was that about?
it was just it's called Inflexible Me. And it was just my journey with inflexibility. From a young age, I was physically very, very inflexible, and I was super athletic. And it was a major, it sounds so silly, but it was a major insecurity of mine. And I hated my body because of it. Some people hate their body because of, I don't know, other reasons. I hated my body because I was inflexible. And when I was 31, I took a 1-year sabbatical and traveled by myself, a backpack through Costa Rica, through Panama, and did a bunch of other traveling. I went to Bali.
Oh, my
Yeah.
body.
And so basically through that, it was a journey, kind of like an eat, pray, love of my journey of understanding that it wasn't my body that it was inflexible, it was my mind.
Yes.
And started to have all these revelations. And then it turned into a self-love journey of understanding how little I liked myself,
Yeah.
and how to basically rebuild the connection to me so that I liked myself again, and then loved myself, and started basically it. There are a lot of foundational principles from that book that I use today, but have now expanded upon greatly. But the bare bones was in that book. So
Yes. Wow. And so now the second book, what's it going to be about?
um it's going to be how oh gosh, I can't say the title, but it's a play off of Inflexible Me and Alchemy. So there is going to be a me in there. But it's basically about how I had to get very raw and real and rip off the facade, take off all the masks, and expose
Yes.
who I am. It's going to be that journey. It's about the journey of rediscovering your own authenticity, and how to then
Yeah.
allow that part of you to be the front person in your life.
Exactly, that
Mhm.
that mask drop. I noticed that myself as well, it was difficult, but I'm noticing myself, being more my authentic self, because we always have these ways because of society. Well, I'm not too much of that anyway, but you still grew up with it somehow. And so yeah, it's interesting. I'm so proud of you. It's so awesome, the journey that you did. And I'm so grateful for having you here, because people can learn a lot about all these things, that the ways that we can be healed, and the ways that the new uh the new generation of therapists should be working in this way, in an equal way, in an honest way, in a way where you learn to help yourself and not be depending on somebody that is teaching you, right? And I love that. I thank you so much. And it was so great. We passed actually the hour, and I hope everybody loved hearing her story. And because certainly, I'm sure in the I was always talking in Dutch now. In the future, we will be seeing more of each other, because I learned so much from you when it comes to how to set up things, because yeah, we have a similar journey.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I thank you for all the tips that you give me as well on how to set that up, because the skills are there. It's just the you know the logistics of it, I guess
Yes.
you can
Yeah.
call it. And
Hmm.
so I totally recommend people to go to her website and check out her channel, subscribe, because seriously, she has the most amazing guests. She had this week, you had Laura Eisenhower, and
Yeah.
I,
And next week I have Elizabeth April coming on, so I'm really excited.
what is she doing?
Elizabeth April, she's got a pretty big YouTube channel. I'm pretty sure it's close to 100,000. And she does a lot of channeling through the Galactic Federation.
Oh, wow.
She has a huge healing. She does a lot of healing as well. She's had some great videos on the sex trafficking of children. And
Right.
so I'm bringing her on. She's a great guest. So
Oh,
she's next
wow.
week. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely gonna check that out because I always, I can't be there always live, but I always watch your episodes that you have with people that you interview, and you did a great job with my interview as well because things came out that I didn't even expect would come out, and actually, it is also in my video list where I did with her an interview and about my story. So well, I hope definitely you are going to come back in the future.
Oh, absolutely. I'll have to have you back on my channel as well because people loved you.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And guys, I hope you all learned something here. And if there are any questions, you can always leave them in the comments. And I will, or you can actually leave them at her as well, because I do believe your contact is in there. But yeah, if you want to know something, you know where to find her. It's all in the description. And I thank you all for listening and watching. I see you there, Luke Slytalker. Great that you are here as well, and Mr. Fox. And thank you all for coming. I wish you all a great, great day. Thank you also, Nicole.